I think that,
I always go to you.
but I'm a commissioner.
It don't matter. Go ahead, Jay.
So moved.
Okay, second.
I'll second it.
There you go. So all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Any opposed? Good to go. And, I'm assuming Jesse got the minutes out to everybody, and if you looked them over, if everybody approves, get a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
There you go. Second. Let's do a second. And so for people in the public, we're gonna do this two different ways. If you got somewhere you gotta go and you wanna go ahead and make public comment now, you can. But we're gonna get a couple of presentations. And once we get those, we're gonna have discussion about some of this stuff. And if you would rather just kind of raise your hand and I'll call on you if you want to discuss it. When we're discussing it, it's kind of something new. I'm try to get the public more involved. So if anybody wants to talk before the meeting, you can now. I think there's 2 people public. Or if you don't, if you'd rather wait till you can have input if you want to later, we'll just go to that. All right. And so with that, we'll just kind of go to moving on. And with that, I guess we'll get fisheries management plan updates.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chairman Corbett.
You want to do the?
Yeah, I'll do a very, very brief coastal habitat protection plan update.
So can I put you on the clock? 3 minutes.
You can try it.
Their public comment, they can use a little more time, but I'm on. Jesse, how you doing?
Doing good. How you saying?
So like I say, today, I just want to provide a very, very basic overview of the 2026 edition of the Coastal Habitat Protection Plan, or the CHIP as we call it. I'm not the habitat expert at the division at all. So unfortunately, if y'all have questions, I probably won't be able to answer them myself, but I can get you in contact with Carly Deaton. He is our CHIP expert at the division, kind of the leader of our CHIP team. He'll also be presenting to the Habitat and Water Quality Advisory Committee next week on Wednesday, the 18th. That presentation will kind of go into a lot more detail about the 2026 edition of the CHIP. So if you're interested in it, I suggest tuning into that presentation. All right, so the Coastal Habitat Protection Plan, or the CHIP as we abbreviate it, is a DEQ-wide plan that is based here with Division of Marine Fisheries staff, and its purpose is the long-term enhancement of coastal fisheries by addressing habitat and water quality needs for fishery species. The CHIP is a creation of the 1997 Fisheries Reform Act, which requires 5-year updates to the plan, and it tasks DEQ staff from the Division of Marine Fisheries, the Division of Coastal Management, and the Division of Water Resources to participate in the plan. Although typically we do include folks from other divisions as well as external partners in the development of the CHIP. The CHIP requires approval not just from the Marine Fisheries Commission, but also by the Coastal Resources Commission and the Environmental Management Commission. All 3 of them must approve the adoption of the CHIP in order for it to be adopted. So we're currently in the very early part of the drafting process for the 2026 CHIP. The basic framework that I'll show you in just a minute was developed through internal division scoping meetings and refined input from the CHIP team, as well as the CHIP steering committee. And that CHIP steering committee is actually a committee that's made up of 2 people from the Marine Fisheries Commission, 2 folks from the Environmental Management Commission, and 2 folks from the Coastal Resources Commission. So for 2026, we're proposing 4 basic chapters for the CHIP this go around. 1 chapter will be on ecosystem-based management. 1 will be on SAV protection and restoration. And 1 will be on planning for wetland changes in the coming decades. And then lastly, we'll do 1 on community engagement for habitat protection. And if you'd like any more details on those chapters, Charlie would love to provide more detail. I can give you his email or his phone number. So it's important to note that if you're familiar with the previous iterations of the CHIP, a lot of this won't actually look completely new. This year, we're really just trying to build on what the CHIP has already gotten going in the past. So for the timeline moving forward, DMF staff will be developing these 4 issue papers along with partners across from DEQ. And we'll be discussing those with the interagency CHIP team as well as the CHIP steering committee in the next few months. We're aiming to have a complete draft of the CHIP complete by the late summer. And that way the Marine Fisheries Commission, the CRC, and the EMC can actually send that out for public comment. The public can then provide comments on the CHIP, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, final adoption of the CHIP will occur in November of 2026. That's when the Marine Fisheries Commission will actually vote on adoption. And that's all I have for the Coastal Habitat Protection Plan. I'm happy to take some very basic questions if anybody has any, or just turn it over to Jeff and Dan for the Fisheries Management Plan updates.
Anybody have anything for the CHIP? Jeff and Dan, show you.
Give me 1 second to get this presentation pulled up for then.
While we're doing that, since we got some new members, why don't I run around and let everybody introduce themselves? And we'll start with Selby.
Selby, in college, commercial fish with my dad forever and doing it on my own now. And now I'm getting involved in the management of it.
I'm Lewis Dunn. I'm from Raleigh. This is my second term doing this. I'm in medical sales.
Randy Proctor, recreational, and I think this is my 16th year.
Jeff Buckle, fishery scientist with North Carolina State University.
I'm Bill Tarpley. I'm retired from the boat business, but I was trained as a fisheries biologist. Worked in that field for a number of years before I got in the boat business.
Jake Griffin, commercial fisherman from Wanchese on down there to Wilmington.
Jesse Mock, commercial fisherman and run a seafood market in Surf City.
Tom Roller, I'm a fishing guide and I serve on the Fisheries Commission.
I'm Sammy Corbett. I'm a commercial fisherman and I'm chairman of the Marine Fisheries Commission.
And we have one member online too.
Is that me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Tommy Day here from Wilmington, North Carolina, recreational, and I'm a physician and filmmaker on the side. This is my first term.
Okay, well,
Are we ready?
we'll get started then. So good evening. My name is Dan Zaff. I'm one of the FMP coordinators with the division based out of the Morehead City office. And with me today is Jeff Dobbs, the other FMP coordinator, who's also based out of Morehead City. So while part of our role is development and coordinating development of FMPs, that's actually not the entirety of our role as FMP coordinators. Once an FMP is adopted by the commission, the work doesn't end. In reality, it's just beginning. Essentially, our role is to work closely with species leads and other division staff to coordinate not only development of state FMPs, but also the implementation. So in other words, we help ensure management strategies adopted in FMPs are implemented, particularly when implementation occurs over time, not just immediately when an FMP is adopted. So tonight, we're going to provide you an update on recently adopted FMPs with ongoing implementation steps, and then a status update for plans currently under review. If you listen to the Marine Fisheries Commission meetings in November of last year and February this year, this information is very similar to what was presented at those meetings with a few other updates to it. So we'll start the presentation by outlining implementation of adopted management strategies for eastern oyster, hard clam, southern flounder, estuarine striped bass, and spotted sea trout. And then we'll finish with updates about southern flounder, red drum, and kingfish's plans, which are the plans that are currently under review.
All right, we'll lead off the currently being implemented plans with the Eastern Oyster Plan. So Amendment 5 to the Eastern Oyster FMP was adopted in May of last year. The plan selected a three-tiered approach that balanced the value of oysters as both a fishery resource and a habitat for other species. The development of the deep water oyster recovery areas, or DORAs, prioritizes the habitat value of oysters. The updated culture-supported harvest strategy was designed to balance the fishery and habitat value of oysters, while rotational harvest sites prioritized the fishery value of oysters. Since adoption, the division has been working to implement the strategies in the FMP. Sonar surveys were completed for the entirety of both Doras. Scuba surveys were completed in the Neuse River, and scuba monitoring will resume this spring to collect oyster densities within the Pamlico Dora. Ideally, these reefs can be surveyed multiple times until the next FMP cycle, but staffing availability may limit the number of surveys we can accomplish. The Culch-supported harvest season lengths are determined through pre- and mid-season sampling informed by industry input. Commercial fishermen helped identify sampling locations to ensure we were assessing areas actively used by the fleet. Initial season lengths were set based on preseason sampling with the ability to extend but not reduce season length, providing harvesters with greater certainty on season length. Mid-season sampling sites identified by fishermen showed that abundance of legal-sized oysters was high enough to extend the season in the Hyde, Neuse, and Pamlico areas by up to 5 weeks through proclamation. Areas that had already reached their maximum allowable season length were not further extended, and northern dare sampling showed no extension was warranted. Further conversations with fishermen reported that legal oyster abundance remained high through the end of the season in Long Shoal, Middleton, Wysocking, and the Great Narrows area. Third tier is rotational harvest culch sites, which prioritize fishery value on deep water 10-acre planted sites. These rotational sites were established in proclamation and remained open for the entirety of the mechanical season, providing additional harvest opportunity while reinforcing the division's long-term culch planting investments. Overall, this season demonstrated that Amendment 5 is working as intended, integrating habitat protection, culch planting, and industry collaboration to expand harvest opportunities when the resource supports it, while maintaining protections for long-term sustainability. As a reminder, Amendment 3 to the hard clam FMP was developed and adopted by the MFC at the same time as the oyster plan due to overlap in management. The plan implemented a 3-year phase-out of mechanical clam harvest fishery due to concerns over its negative effects on habitat, significant effort to enforce, and waning participation. However, the provision allowing mechanical clam harvest in conjunction with maintenance dredging ended immediately upon adoption of the plan and will no longer be permitted. Per Amendment 3, the mechanical clam harvest season opened by proclamation on December 8, 2025, and will close on March 31, 2026. The fishery will reopen annually in December for 2 more years and will close after the 2027-2028 season. Division staff have begun the process of amending the applicable rules to formalize the changes for consistency with the plan. Additionally, support for the division to develop a method to quantify recreational harvest of shellfish was adopted as part of both the Eastern Oyster and hard clam amendments. The division has formed a work group and is working through initial steps. However, legislative change may be needed to accomplish this. Division is in the process of implementing a portion of Amendment 4 to the Southern Flounder FMP. Amendment 4 management strategy allows for a spring oscillated recreational flounder season, which includes Gulf and summer flounder. The season is limited to the ocean using hook and line gears. The spring season was included in Amendment 3 and 4 to provide recreational fishermen with the opportunity to harvest summer and Gulf flounder during a time when they are less likely to catch southern flounder. As I'm sure you're aware, this season was never utilized in Amendment 3 due to concerns for quota overages during previous fall seasons and the possibility of anglers mistakenly harvesting southern flounder. This season is now feasible given the recent sector allocation shift in Amendment 4 to 50-50. However, North Carolina cannot open a spring season for summer flounder, which is jointly managed by the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. These entities require recreational summer flounder regulations to remain status quo in 2026 and 2027 based on the ASMFC's recreational demand model for the species. This means that North Carolina's recreational summer flounder season in 2026 and 2027 must align with the fall flounder season. Based on this, the division has opened a 2-week Gulf flounder only recreational season from March 9th to the 22nd of this year. The opening is limited to ocean waters only from the north end of Portsmouth Island to the South Carolina border to limit catch of summer and southern flounder. Harvest is limited to hook and line with a minimum size of 15 inches total length and a bag limit of 1 fish per person per day.
All right, so moving on to striped bass. Amendment 2 of the striped bass FMP, which was jointly developed by the division and the Wildlife Resources Commission, was adopted by the MFC in November 2022. The goal of Amendment 2, which is paraphrased on this slide, is to manage estuarine striped bass fisheries to achieve self-sustaining populations that provide sustainable harvest based on science-based decision-making processes. And if biological and/or environmental factors prevent a self-sustaining population, then alternate management strategies will be implemented that provide protection for and access to the resource. The adopted Amendment 2 management strategy for the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse rivers included continuation of the no possession measure, which was implemented with adoption of Supplement A in 2019. The Amendment to Adaptive Management Framework states that in 2025, data through 2024 will be reviewed to determine if populations are self-sustaining and if sustainable harvest can be determined. In addition, the approved motion to adopt included language to maintain the gill net prohibition through 2024 to allow for assessment of its performance. And that's referring to the gill net prohibition in the Neuse and Tar, Pamlico rivers that prohibited gill nets upstream of the ferry lines in those rivers. The data review prescribed by the Amendment to Adaptive Management Framework was completed, and the division striped bass leads presented results to the Marine Fisheries Commission in August 2025. In short, the analysis concluded the harvest and gill net closures have been ineffective at increasing adult abundance, expanding the age structure, and promoting recruitment, and that the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse River striped bass stocks are currently not sustainable. Consistent with the Amendment 2 goal and the Adaptive Management Framework, Division and Wildlife Resources Commission staff developed harvest management measures that provide protection for and access to the resource. For 2025, the division striped bass leads presented information to the Marine Fisheries Commission about management changes that will occur for striped bass in the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse rivers in 2026. The changes, which will be implemented via DMF Proclamation Authority and the WRC temporary rulemaking process, will include only allowing recreational and commercial harvest upriver of the gill net distance from shorelines in the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse rivers, and those are indicated by the blue lines on this map. And harvest will only be allowed from April 1 through April 30th. And the limitations on the spatial extent of harvest and the temporal extent of harvest are being done to limit the harvest of AR stock striped bass, which occur in these rivers for part of the year. So the recreational and commercial possession limit will be 1 fish per person per day and a harvest slot limit of 18 to 22 inches or 1 fish greater than 27 inches total length. And then moving on to spotted sea trout. Amendment 1 to the spotted sea trout FMP was adopted by the MFC in March 2025. Adopted recreational management included a 14 to 20 inch slot limit with an allowance for 1 fish over 26 inches and a 3 fish bag limit. The adopted commercial management included a Saturday to Sunday harvest closure from January to September and a Saturday to Monday harvest closure from October to December. And this management is intended to reduce harvest and end overfishing of the spotted sea trout stock. Additional management included formalizing commercial stop net fishery management in the FMP and adopting the adaptive management framework with the caveat that adaptive management measures for sustainable harvest be brought to the Commission for review prior to implementation. And the Amendment 1 management also extended cold stun harvest closures by 15 days through June 30th and adopted the cold stun adaptive management framework. So at the May 2025 Marine Fisheries Commission meeting, our spotted sea trout species lead, Lucas Penzinger, provided details of a significant cold stun event that occurred in January 2025 prior to adoption of Amendment 1. In response to the cold stun, the division issued a proclamation on January 22nd, 2025, closing the spotted sea trout fisheries through June 15th. With the adoption of Amendment 1 in March of 2025, the division issued a proclamation on April 8th, 2025, extending the closure through June 30th. And after a delay of more than 3 months, the Wildlife Resources Commission followed suit and closed the spotted sea trout fishery in their jurisdiction from May 2nd to June 30th using the temporary rulemaking process. In accordance with Amendment 1 management, the fisheries reopened via proclamation on July 1st, 2025, at which time changes to the recreational size and bag limit and the commercial closures were implemented. And once again, WRC followed suit and implemented Amendment 1 management measures on July 1 via their temporary rulemaking process. Amendment 1 stop net fishery management was incorporated into proclamation when that fishery opened on October 15th, 2025. So I'm sure everybody's aware, a significant cold sun event occurred again in late January and early February 2026. And the recreational and commercial fisheries were closed by proclamation on February 6, 2026. And per Amendment 1, they'll reopen on July 1, 2026. WRC has initiated temporary rulemaking to close spotted sea trout harvest in their jurisdiction, with the earliest effective date being April 6th. So it'll be a 2-month delay from when the fisheries were closed by the division. The division spotted sea trout leads will provide updates to the Marine Fisheries Commission about the 2025 and 2026 cold stun events and any recommendations about the need for additional conservation measures as the data becomes available to evaluate those cold stuns.
All right, now I'm going to transition to discussing plans that are currently under review. So here's the FMP review schedule showing review of the Southern Flounder, Red Drum, and Kingfish's FMPs are currently underway. As a reminder, Amendment 4 to the Southern Flounder FMP was adopted in August 2025. Amendment 5 is underway to further address the requests of the MFC. So we'll now take a quick look at each of these 3 plans. Our first plan under review is Southern Flounder. The division is working to draft the Southern Flounder Amendment 5 now. Earlier this month, the DEQ Secretary approved broadening the scope of Amendment 5 to allow harvest levels to be changed in response to planned state-level stock assessments and interim indicator analyses. Solicitation for FMP Advisory Committee membership will occur later this month. Next, the MFC chairman will appoint the AC from the list of interested candidates. The FMP AC workshop is scheduled to occur over 3 days in early June, where the advisory committee will review and provide input on content and management options included in draft Amendment 5. The division will then work to incorporate the AC input into a second draft. This draft will be brought to the MFC at their November 2026 business meeting to approve it for public and AC comment, with final adoption scheduled for May of 2027. Just as a side note, I wanted to mention that Charlton Godwin has replaced Holly White as a co-lead for Flounder, and that changed between Amendment 4 and 5. Next, we have the Red Drum FMP. The scheduled review of the state Red Drum FMP began in 2025. The division will convene a plan development team to begin exploring potential management issues, and we'll keep the MFC updated throughout the process.
And last but not least, the scheduled review of the Kingfish's FMP began in 2025. As part of the FMP development, species leads are evaluating available fishery independent, dependent, and biological data to examine abundance trends, age, and lake structure. Results of this analysis will inform any potential management changes that may be proposed in Amendment 1. And the results of the analysis will be presented to the MFC later in 2026. In addition to potential management changes, the data evaluation will inform potential methods for monitoring the stock moving forward. Amendment 1 will replace or remove the current kingfish management triggers. This change is needed because of survey changes limiting the usefulness of the current triggers to inform kingfish population trend. And the division plans to keep the Marine Fisheries Commission updated throughout the development of this amendment and the progress with it. So I'll finish by mentioning that review of the blue crab and bay scallop FMPs will begin later this year. The division remains concerned about the blue crab stock and the effectiveness of Amendment 3 management in recovering the stock, and developed options that could be implemented through the Amendment 3 adaptive management framework. A benchmark stock assessment for blue crab is currently underway, with completion tentatively anticipated later this year. The Amendment 3 Adaptive Management Framework provides a mechanism to respond to assessment results using adaptive management. So once the assessment is complete, the division will consider whether Amendment 3 Adaptive Management or the scheduled FMP review, which takes at least 2 years, will be used to address results. All right, so contact information for Jeff and I is on the screen. Again, our role is to work with the species leads and other division staff to coordinate development and implementation of FMPs. If you have species-specific questions, a list of the division species leads and their contact information is maintained on our website and can be accessed using the QR code on the screen. So we'll take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for them? Okay.
Oh, you want me to do my?
You might as well, might as well.
Oh,
You haven't talked enough yet, don't you get it out of your system.
As hopefully the advisory committee members saw, I sent out an email about 2 weeks ago with an update on the February 2026 Marine Fisheries Commission with a little bit of information about what occurred at that meeting. And that's something that I hope to do after every commission meeting moving forward. One of the things that y'all may have seen in that update is that at that February meeting, the commission selected their preferred language for a proposed rule for the management of Atlantic Bonito. There were 4 different options presented to the commission in the Atlantic Bonito management issue paper. The commission ultimately selected option 4 for Atlantic Bonito. That would put a 5-fish recreational bag limit in permanent rule. So upon the effective date of that rule, there would be a 5-fish recreational bag limit. It also provided broad proclamation authority to the division director, both for the recreational and the commercial sectors. That broad proclamation authority, the division director would have the ability to implement size limit changes, season closures, area closures, if changes to the bag limit, to the trip limit. Some of the other options considered was option 1, obviously a status quo. Option 2 would be something very similar to the sheep's head rule, where it just gives broad proclamation authority to the director, but upon the effective date of the rule, there wouldn't actually be any changes in place then. And then option 3 to that rule for that issue paper would be also that broad proclamation authority. But if the division director did institute any management via proclamation, the recreational bag limit couldn't be any higher than 5. So again, what the commission ultimately selected is option 4. That would set a 5-fish recreational bag limit and permanent rule, as well as give the division director proclamation authority for the management of Atlantic Bonito. And one of the interesting things about this proposed rule, about each one of the options besides status quo, is that built into the rule is prior MFC consent. So basically what would happen in theory anyway is the division would analyze data that we have available for Atlantic Bonito. If it was determined that there was additional management that was needed for Bonito, the director would draft a proclamation that would come before the Marine Fisheries Commission at your next scheduled business meeting. It would provide the opportunity for the public to comment on the Marine Fisheries Commission meeting on that proposed proclamation. And then the commission would actually vote basically yes or no on whether or not they would consent to the director issuing a proclamation and instituting those Atlantic Bonito management measures. If they said yes, following the meeting, the division director would issue that proclamation. And so this February meeting, when the commission selected their preferred language, it kind of starts the process for the division to begin work on a fiscal analysis that will be submitted to the Office of State Budget Management this spring, assuming that OSBM approves that in May. At the commission meeting in May, the commission will vote on notice of text. So basically, if the commission approves it in May, it will get sent out to the public for a 60-day public comment period, as well as a public hearing. In November is when the commission would be scheduled to vote on final adoption of that rule. They would receive any public input that was provided and then vote to either adopt or not adopt that rule. And it is important to note that while it seems like at the February meeting, because the commission did select their preferred language, that when that happens, it's done, it's set in stone. That's actually not the case. There's still a lot of opportunity for the public to provide input, to suggest changes. The commission still could alter course. If that were to happen, say at the May commission meeting, if they didn't choose to move forward with option 4, if some other option was selected, all that would do would basically be, it would trigger the division to have to work on another fiscal analysis for that option that the commission ultimately selected, and then it would just kind of start the process over there. That's all I got, Chairman Corbett.
Very good. Anybody on Atlantic Bonita? Nothing on Atlantic Bonita, okay. So when we decided to do this way this time, you know, wanted to have discussion and not just on anything they talked about. If you've got anything you want to talk about, I don't know, what else, pinfish or croakers or spots or anything else. You know, if you got anything you want to talk about, anything on your mind. be glad to
Spots.
Hear it now and anybody in the audience, if we make comments up here and y'all want to make one, raise your hand and you can get in on it with us. All right, go ahead.
I just want to mention, Brent Fulcher is online. He actually showed up in the attendee list. I just moved him over to the panelists.
Okay. Yes, sir. Brent, can you hear me?
Hey, Sammy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. I should be there in about 5 minutes. I didn't realize I got my calendar wrong, but anyway, I'll be there in about 5 minutes. But it is the position of the North Carolina Fisheries Association that there shouldn't be any FMPs started without a viable stock assessment that shows a need for management. We do recommend and ask the division to do the research and collect the data on all species that do not have an FMP presently to see if there is a need on any of them. But without that stock assessment, we do not recommend any management other than status quo until at one point in time that you find that there is a problem with any fishery, not just bonita or any other one. And I'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
All right. Thank you, sir. I know you want to talk about spot. I want to talk about spot.
This year specifically, I mean, I've not been doing it, but so many years, but it seems like they're coming later and later in the year and everyone's either having to quit or just dump back baskets of spots now because season closed December 10th. I understand we're probably gonna get January 1st next year, but I mean, I think we should get a lot longer than that because I mean, we were seeing spots into the end of February this year, a few. And there's a Virginia mullet fishery during that time, and to catch Virginia mullet, unfortunately, we're gonna be catching spots. You can't avoid them, so we're just wasting fish.
And so when this first came about almost 6 years ago, right, Jake?
Yeah.
I had a lot of conversations with Chris Backsavage, who's the lead, the AFMFC. And we discussed this and I had him pull up the data that, you know, this spot closure, and this is the spot closure that Virginia wanted. And the head of the AFMFC is from Virginia. And because it doesn't affect them, they don't catch spots that time of year. And it was a good time to close it. They were looking for a 1.5% reduction, which is nothing. You know, pretty much if you only need a 1.5% reduction, probably don't have a problem. But aside from that, we looked at the data and at the time we knew that we weren't going to get a 1.5% reduction closing it when they did. Because 6 years ago, the water was a lot colder in December than it is now. As we all know that live on the coast, you know, things have changed a lot in 10 years. And so, you know, I suggested at the time, and I'm still suggesting every day, that our closure should have been in June or July. And so we looked at some statistics, and if we closed it in June for 3 weeks, it's a direct spot fishery. So the nets they're spot fishing with, if you close it then, won't go in the water because they're not catching anything with the spots. And those 3 weeks were it was somewhere between 8.5% and 12.5% reduction. And so, you know, we looked at it as, man, that'd be a good thing. And if you feel like there's a problem, we're going to give you more than you need. And those fish aren't going to get killed and thrown back like I suggested at the time was gonna happen with friend Foreman. And so now, like this year, I know myself and Jake, we could, just because we got tired of shoveling them overboard. And I only went 2 days. And I said, I can't do this. I'm going back to crabbing because I'm not shoveling, $2.50 a pound spots overboard dead for the crabs to eat, And, so I think Kat and Chris have got together and they got us, hopefully now that, our closure will come on January 1 of 27 and then go through April. But what I would like everybody to keep thinking about, because my next thing that I'm gonna push for 28 is to put back in another thing with the FMFC, because they have a new approval system. We have to give it to them and they have to review it and see if they approve it. But I would love to go to that summertime closure when we get a good reduction and it's a direct spot fishery and we won't be killing fish, because the sea mullet fishery isn't gonna change. It's there and the guys are gonna fish for them. And so, I mean, even this year, they were catching them up here off of Ocracoke and Morehead City. And, last year and the year before, they didn't catch any at that time, but, so it's moving forward all the time. And I'm just saying that so you guys will know where we're coming from, because these guys have heard it for 4 or 5 years. And, so that's what we're kind of hoping to, hopefully we've got it in where it'll close on January 1 this year. And then hopefully we can put back in again and get it for that 3-week summer fishery. And actually get a reduction instead of not getting a reduction and killing fish, killing spots for nothing. So, talking about the spot closure. Yes, sir.
So I disagree with that summer fishery because there's a lot of guys on the internal part of Neuse River, Pamlico River, that they make some pretty good money catching spots, and that's a great time for selling spots. But I do believe that you should have, if you don't have a complete closure, you should have a line like South 58 Bridge, that it should stay open later, because as those fish move south, you still get that opportunity. And I've always kind of advocated for that.
And I got no problem with that either. I'd like to talk with you more about that. Go ahead.
So we're just doing, close the ocean in the summer.
Spots just close. Well, and that's a good idea. And I'll try to get the data. We'd have to see how many spots come out of the ocean.
That's true.
Time of year. Because they're still looking for 1.5% reduction. They're not getting it with the closure they got.
Yeah.
So they're still looking for a 1.5% reduction, but we can look those numbers up. Yes, sir, Jay.
I think one of the biggest things about this whole spot closure is the fact that this all came about when I was on the Southern Advisory Panel. Like you said, it was supposed to be a 3-year FMP to meet the 1.5%. And here it is. Now we're into the 6th year of it. And we have seen no homework. Nobody's give us any updates of where we're at. And I know this is coming from Atlantic State, so it's kind of, hemmed up at that level, but still we need to know where we're at with the stock assessment, or where we're falling into on our management plan, because if we need to go ahead and implement something heavier, we need to be proactive about it, instead of we've been under this guideline for the past 6 years, which was supposed to only be 3 years. Maybe we don't even need to have a closure moving forward, but we need to know where our stocks are at. I feel like that's one of the most aggravating parts of it. It was supposed to be a 3-year FMP. Then they were going to stop and reassess everything and see if we need to bump it up to 10%. And here we are, just rolling right on with it and just keeping the same dates. It needs to be expanded and looked into a little bit more.
Yes, sir, Brent.
And so this past year, the northern states and probably North Carolina, I'm not sure about Carolina, but definitely Virginia, Maryland, Delaware had one of their biggest years on spot landing that they've had in probably 10 or 15 years. They got to the point you couldn't even sell a spot down here in the late fall. And those spots were from here right on south. I had people call me from Georgetown wanting to bring spots, whatever you give them. I said, I can't use them. I don't need them. I mean, you take Atlantic Seafood, he was already overloaded. They got more spots frozen now than they had
all of last year,
Yeah.
and they didn't want no more fish. I mean, and so you're talking about a reduction, but you don't know what your stock increase is, like Jake was just mentioning. The stock sounds like to me with that amount of land that your coastwide stock's gone up. So if you're trying to get a reduction and you're getting an increase to begin with, I mean, it's almost ludicrous. It goes back to the same thing. You can't manage fisheries without viable stock assessments. And if we don't get back to some pointed math there, I mean, you're just shooting in the dark all the time. Throw anything on the wall and see what sticks, but you haven't got some viable information to work with, and not something 5 years old either, something that's fluid. You can't manage Mother Nature like that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can help provide a little bit of background on Spot. So I would suggest that if anybody hasn't already, Chris Batsavage provided some really good background information on Spot during the November Marine Fisheries Commission meeting. And I think he probably answered a lot of the comments and questions that have come up here tonight during that presentation. I'll add that the ASMFC has a Spot stock assessment planned. Right now, they're working on croaker. Once that's completed, they'll start to work on the Spot stock assessment. In between stock assessments for Spot, the fishery is monitored by the traffic light analysis. All of this information is available on the ASMFC website. And it just is used to monitor the fishery. The traffic light is what was used to initially put in the season closure. It was a 1% reduction. It wasn't quite 1.5%. And it's used to monitor progress. The most recent traffic light analyses indicate that there has been improvement in the Spot stock, which is what we're kind of hearing here tonight as well, is that we're seeing more Spot, and that's reflected in the data as well. But the Science Management Board opted to keep the management measures in place until we actually have a stock assessment that gives us a better idea of the status of the Spot stock. And if you have other questions about it, I would certainly recommend getting in touch with Chris Batsavage.
And if you're interested in watching the November presentation, I'd be happy to send y'all links to that recording. We have it all available online and everything.
Anything else? Yes, you don't.
Yeah, I just more of a question about limits per operation. If we're trying to go about this where we're trying to utilize the resource and protect the resource, I look at the bluefish fishery. When these fish come in the inlets in the spring of the year, and it drops back to a 500-pound trip limit, and you got people who have to go, they got two people working with them, two people jumping the same skill, license holders, but they're allowed 500-pound blues. They're having to throw back 300-pound blues. But if you allowed multiple limits per operation, you wouldn't have that waste. You'd be able to utilize what you catch. And I mean, you see, you're able to have multiple limits on the same vessel with oysters. And then even, was it 3 years ago when Kathy allowed 2 limits of flounders when it was the exceptional hook and line fishery? She allowed 2 limits then. It's like, if we're trying to eliminate waste, need to maybe look into options that allow us to eliminate that waste by having multiple limits per operation.
Anybody else? Any other fish or some related topic anybody would like to talk about?
Can I ask a question about the comment that you just made? The 500-pound trip limit. I'm assuming with I'm not super familiar with the bluefish fishery and the timing of when we implement trip limits in it, but I'm assuming we would implement a trip limit in there because to not catch the quota so quickly.
Right.
If we allow multiple limits on one vessel because there's multiple people with licenses, would that not kind of eat that quota up a little bit faster, or is that not really a concern? Or I'm just would like a little bit more information about kind of.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I look at it, you've got, the way that it is right now, everybody has to be in their own boat. So like a lot of the younger kids up there at home, they'll go set a couple hundred yards of small mesh back at the inlet and fish down it and get their limit out of it, but there are two license holders going under the same boat. So they're only allowed that 500 pound. So you could, in theory, take 10 boats and reduce it down to 5 boats. You know what I mean? There's not as fear in the water, and you're not having those dead jackals.
Yeah, so you would basically be, in theory anyway, making it more efficient because each person wouldn't have to have their own vessel to do it.
Right.
Yeah, it'd just be a split trip ticket.
So are we reaching the bluefish quota every year?
You would have to ask Chris Batsaver specifically, but I think we've been at least getting very close, and we've had to take in transfers from other states.
Well, I know we used to, back when I was chairman the first time, we were giving some of our quota to New Jersey and all because we couldn't reach it, and then we lost it because we were giving it to another state. And so that's probably why we're not, the amount of quota we used to have. I think we lost quota.
Yeah, I mean, we got a little bump here this past year, but. And as far as quota goes, I'm gonna bring up the striped bass, the Atlantic striped bass. We got quota on the table. Why are we not allowed one day for the past 9 years? You look at the proclamation, you try to look up a proclamation on the Atlantic striped bass, and they've taken it right on off the list. You know, North Carolina had, was it, as of last year, 180,000 pound of striped bass quota in the Atlantic Ocean. And for the past 9 years, we haven't had one day allowed access. Meanwhile, recreational has still had their one fish bag limit. I don't understand how we can have, you know, independent and fisheries data on a stock that you're not even accessing. There's no research being done. I think it's something that, you know, there's not many participants. You don't have the spiny dogfish fishery like we have the participants in that anymore, but it doesn't mean that the fish aren't there. And the DMF isn't doing any sampling to find out where that stock is at.
Yes, sir, Brent.
I don't think it's really the division's responsibility to survey that. I think that's ASMFC again, but I think you're exactly right. Those fish are marketable. They are North Carolina's part of the quota. There's no reason they shouldn't catch them. And for probably 15 or 20 years now, I've been advocating that they should give those tags out to those fishermen, let them catch them. That way you don't have an overage like Jake was talking about. Jesse, you mentioned the perfect thing, and you were right. The reason they throttle the fishery back in those increments is so that they don't, when they're seeing fish come so fast, they're trying not to keep it, especially early in the season when the fish are worth a lot of money. And they try and keep those fish throughout the rest of the year so you don't have a choke species like they were talking about earlier with the spots. You're catching sea mullets, but now you're throwing spots away dead. So that was the reason for that. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do. One with the striped bass is you could give the fishermen the tag, let them catch them at their convenience when they want to catch them. Monetarily wise, they're going to make more money. They're going to harvest the fish. It's going to be an economic benefit to the state of North Carolina. And that's the way you can properly manage that fish, and you can control what comes in out of the ocean and also document it. Make that motion, I'll second.
Right. I mean, I'd love to see that fishery get open back up. Like I said, for 9 years it's been closed, but every time you go in there to renew your license, you can get an Atlantic striped bass permit. Ain't nothing but just another piece of paper. Has no value to it this day and age, and that's pretty sickening that we've got our state's allotted quota, and it used to be up there 480,000 pounds. Now we're just giving it away and let it keep getting dwindled down. Like you said, if you had tags, it would allow the state to have landings. It would allow the fishermen, and even in the beach seine fishery, when we're seeing these fish in the spring, that you could have DMF staff come out and tag these fish and find out where they're going. And I offered that up to Charleston, but they threw that right away. But I think it really does need to be looked into to open that fishery back up and look at the options, because if we got quota, we should be utilizing it.
And if we don't use it, eventually they're gonna give it to Virginia, and Virginia's gonna catch it. That same fish, when it comes off this coast and goes there, they're gonna catch those fish.
So, I've been told that it's all AR stock fish, but how do we know? There's been no fish. They haven't been able to take any odorless because there hasn't been any at the fish house. No doubt on it.
Potentially in the interior could be that way. I don't think your ocean fish are that way. I think big wild fish just naturally transit.
Yeah.
Why did they close that fishery to begin with 9 years ago?
I don't know why they quit letting them fish the permit.
I don't know
I
either.
think because they decided it was Roanoke stock. I don't think they had any data support that it was Roanoke stock, but they were wanting so bad to build that stock back up. That kind of.
Yeah, because that was when I spoke with Charlton about it. That's all that he was pretty well determined that it was those Roanoke stock fish. The fish that I was seeing in the spring of the year, 12 miles north of Oregon Inlet, were fish that were going in to spawn up the river.
And just to be clear, Brent, just to make sure that I'm clear also. When you're saying Roanoke stock fish, you're talking about the stock of fish from the Albemarle and Roanoke Sound Management, so Roanoke River Management areas, not fish that are stocked.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And, I certainly don't have the expertise in striped bass to answer any of those questions or comment on anything, but I would certainly suggest if you have additional questions or would like to provide comments to the species leads, Charlton Godwin's a good guy to get in touch with, or actually our current species lead for the ocean stock striped bass is Robert Corbin, who's up in the Elizabeth City office as well.
Management of striped bass is really complicated and it's very challenging at the ASMSC level. And this is a good question for Charlton, particularly when you start talking about the differences between the estuarine fish and the ocean fish. I'd give you a good answer there.
Yeah, and we definitely have genetic studies that show a component of the AR stock is part of the Atlantic migratory stock. There's some mixing there. Presumably if they're here in the spring, they're on their way down. If they're here in the wintertime, it might be part of that feeding migration. But we do have some fishery independent studies that we go out and we tag them and we get DNA samples and stuff. We have a trawl survey. Not us, but the cooperative. But we also have a hook and line survey that we go out and the stock is not doing great in the Atlantic stock is not, but we do have tagging efforts every year and we try to get some information on them.
Do we have any tagging that shows if these fish are going to Virginia and then back to North Carolina?
I can comment on that. Yeah,
Yes,
there's
sir.
two different studies. One looked at the fish that were tagged in the Roanoke over a long time period. And in the 80s and 90s, because the ages and sizes were so truncated, those fish never left North Carolina. But then as you saw the age structure and size structure, those fish got bigger and they joined. You started seeing those fish go to New Jersey, get caught in Massachusetts, that they joined that migratory portion of the stock. But it wasn't until they hit a certain size that happened.
Right.
That hasn't been, I don't know if anyone's looked at that. This was a study done probably 10 to 15 years ago. So it'd be good to see what that looks like now that because a lot's changed in that stock.
Yes.
And there's also been some acoustic tagging of fish, where they put a pinger tag, do a surgery, put it inside the striped bass in the Roanoke, and they saw those fish also got detected in the ocean and moving up farther north in the summer during that feeding migration. So there are AR fish that join that migratory stock. But
And they go to,
great idea.
they go to Virginia.
Yes.
They get harvested. They get harvested.
But this is dated work, so I think
Right,
it's a
yeah.
good idea to get some work. Look at I think the tagging continues on the Roanoke, so that date is there just to be, taken a look at, but then there could be some acoustic tagging of fish that are in the ocean to see if where are those fish? Are those fish Chesapeake fish or are they AR fish?
And I mean, if that 190,000 pounds gets given to Virginia or New Jersey or Maryland, they're gonna catch it.
Right.
Because they catch their quota every year.
I mean, I have paid attention to a lot of the striped bass board hearings at the SMFC, and this has been discussed, right? Not necessarily taking it away, but North Carolina's non-utilization of the quota, and it's, obviously the division's well aware of it. I would argue is because there are really not many fish in the ocean here in the winter, traditional fishery techniques.
We don't have any, we have no fisheries, no participants of back so the 2000s, when there was every outboard from Oregon Inlet Fishing Center on up to Body Island Lighthouse. You know what I mean? You don't have people going and looking for them anymore. And like I said, the spawny dogfish fishery has been so where there hasn't been any participants out there where you would, see those fish from time to time. So, and obviously not having a season or a day to harvest any of them, nobody's going to go look for them and go catch and release the things, just to see if they're there or not. But I would like to, I'd like to work with a division as far as whether it be putting some acoustic tags in some of the fish in the spring of the year. And if it's an acoustic tag, you're going to find out where that fish leaves from the beach, if he's going up the river or if they're going on up the coast. Like I said, I kind of offered that up to Charlton, and that whole idea kind of got shot down, just assuming that they were the Roanoke stockfish.
Did he know whether, was he concerned that like the beach seine fishery maybe wasn't the best method to use to capture them for release? Because release mortality is, you want to minimize that in whatever program you use for those tagging studies. And I haven't talked to him about it. I'm just postulating, but I think it could be that he wasn't necessarily that he was assuming they were all part of the Albemarle stock, but that he just didn't think that the commercial beach seine fishery was a good one to tag out of, because there might be, them getting dragged up on the beach and might have some survival issues.
Yeah, I mean,
When you drag them up, when you're, I guess you're fishing star butters and everything else when you were doing that little beach scene you were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get them fish bunned up right there, if they wanted to tag them, you could go out there with a dip net, like you used to land them on a boat, dip one up, tag him, throw him overboard, he would never hit the sand.
Yeah.
They're big enough when you're catching butterfish, you can tell the difference. I mean,
They're pretty tough.
it would be a great way to tag them.
All right. And it's spring of the year. There's not,
Catching them.
it's not in a swell. It's, the fish, we never cramp them up hard enough, because usually the earlier we start, the more speckles we see. And these striped bass, we don't ever start too early, but once we start, we're seeing these things. But it would be no different than a pound net. And the fish aren't really getting stressed, because like I said, they're not getting cramped. And when I talked to him, he was about the tagging aspect of it to do it. And then I said, I'd just like to see it to a point. I'm not asking for a full robust fishery again, but just let me have 7 to 10 fish to split up amongst the crew. That was my point. And he's like, we'll see if we can, work in some funding to more or less pay for the tagging. And that was kind of the end of it.
Well, I think it is interesting talking about the funding portion of it. That is one of the things that the division struggles with a lot, especially, long-term we've struggled with it, but especially right now, struggling with funding and resources available to do some of this tagging work. And something that we've really wanted to try to do more of is a little bit more cooperative research with fishermen. And obviously I can't speak for the striped bass leads or even for the division as a whole or anything. But if there is an opportunity to collaborate with fishermen on some of this research, that's absolutely something that we would be interested in doing. If it's something that we do have the resources for and that does become a priority of the division. So I think it's worth exploring anyway, the possibility of it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, as like I said before, we look at Jimmy Rule and how much time he spent in with working with scientists and how good of a relationship, and how it took him a long time to get established in there where they would trust his word. But that was such a good bond. That's what we should be striving for, is that collaboration of research and fishermen working with scientists to achieve the most accurate data. So Alaska has a really unique way of data collection, and I'd like to talk with Damiano about that. But I think there'd be a lot of good opportunities for some cooperative research.
Yeah, I actually just this morning read an article that Matt Damiano was actually like interviewed for that article. And in it, he was talking about, and I know I've talked to him about this personally also, about wanting to utilize a little bit more of that cooperative research, like data from that cooperative research in the stock assessment program at the division. So I think speaking with Matt would be a fantastic idea.
Yes, sir. Yes, Laura.
I can study like that cost for something that, I mean, that's not a huge fishery.
Actually, I have no idea how much it would cost. I'm not sure if that's something y'all would have any.
Conventional tagging, like we normally do with normal fish, that's built into a program that we already have currently. It's just a matter of making sure we would have enough tags to tag the fish that we got. An acoustic tagging project would be considerably more expensive. We don't really have those tags on hand. I haven't bought acoustic tags in years, so I'm not sure what the prices are. Dr. Buckle, you might have a better idea.
They're about $375 each for the acoustic tags.
How many would? That doesn't sound like super prohibitive.
Yeah, the tagging program that we have currently doesn't, it just funds conventional tagging. All the acoustic tagging projects that we've done have been standalone projects.
How about the conservation fund? Is there any money in that?
I don't remember how much, I don't know, they give a bunch of it away this time. I'd have to look and see. I don't know how much is there, but that ocean stripers might be a good place to use some of it.
It would be dependent on what acoustic arrays, you need something to receive that. I'm not sure what the current arrays look like in that part of the Atlantic Ocean. But without receivers, the acoustic tags aren't.
Yes, sir, Brent.
So my suggestion was gonna be to Jake was to get in touch with academia, someone like Jeff Buckle that's got an internship, and then go to the Commercial Fishing Resource Fund and then put a proposal together. And it doesn't have to be a huge program. You can start it small. You can start to share the data and build from it. But if you don't start to harvest these fish, like you say, they'll be given away. And it's not just the importance that when they're given away, then the offset of that, the recreational side, you're losing too, because you just lose the whole component of the fishery.
Yeah.
So you lose the whole thing.
Stuff, I'm talking about the conservation fund.
Well,
That helps with the shrimp bycatch, but it's a different pot of money.
And I believe that pot of money was recently utilized, I think in 2024. Some of that money was used to fund some striped bass stocking in the Albemarle Sound. And I think that's a fantastic suggestion, Laura. Like that is something that could be explored to see if it's something that the commission would be interested in using some of that money for.
It'd be good to know.
Just make a
Yeah,
general,
sure, Jeff.
general comment for the younger folks that may not know about it. We used to have what was called a fishery resource grant program, which was a cooperative research program. And the funding went away for that. So talk to your legislators, and we had it and it was very successful. We got a lot of,
Good program.
yeah. So
You can still kind of do it through the cooperative community. I think they do some of the fishery stuff, but it's not as good as the fisheries resource grant. That was just $1 million. That's not that's not a lot of money to the legislature to ask for, but fisheries it is.
It's not like they haven't been raising taxes.
Rounding error.
Anything else? A lot of good discussion so far. Nothing else? All right. I guess we got nothing else. Got on here, we can ask if there's any issues. There's a lot of people on this AC that's got issues. I'm not gonna get into that here. So let's guess we can close it out. Hopefully we can get, maybe we'll call Carlton and, some of these things that we talked about. You and I'll talk about, we can put some presentations together for that next meeting. I think it's in New Bern, isn't it, or is it Morehead?
The next commission meeting?
Yeah.
It's New Bern, yes, sir.
Okay, so maybe we can get some of that stuff, bring some answers to some questions or some more questions to some answers and at the commission meeting.
Sounds good.
I'd like to put that on there, so
All right.
we'll talk about it, get that put on there on some of this stuff.
All right. I'm not certain it'll be Charlton doing it because it's
No, that's
Jeff and
fine.
Dan.
Well, Robert's fine.
Yeah.
I got no problem with Robert. He's very knowledgeable. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming. I know we didn't have a lot to talk about that was something earth shattering, but I think we can maybe get some stuff done with this strike pass thing and do some more. I like Brent's idea on the spot thing. So maybe we can talk about all that. And we'll probably get some of that for the commissioners to look at, listen to, and maybe we can find some money somewhere for some tagging for the motion fish. Well, I know Jake would love to be able to tag some of them when he's doing that beach thing.
Yeah, sure.
thing.
Just be interesting to see, because like I said, for the past 10 years, we don't really have any data of what fish are there.
Yeah. And where they're going, what they're doing.
And I think really a beach scene it would be a really good option as far as,
Those fish, I mean, those fish are like brand new, right?
yeah, like I said, it's just like a pound net. You can harden them up as much as you want, or you can leave it slack and you can go chase them down with a dip net. You know what I mean? I think that would be about, they're not pulled up, dried up there in the sand, and especially spring of the year, we don't fish when there's a bunch of
And
sweat.
I like when you send the videos to me where you're rolling them over the float line and they're. All right, yes, Jeff.
Yeah, on striped bass, question for Dan or Jeff. What's the latest with the Young of the Year survey? Did 25? I haven't seen what it looked like this past year.
So this past year, we still don't have the data processed for that yet. We'll have our annual FMP updates that'll be coming out, later this summer. And we'll have the data for that survey.
There's been some preliminary from East Coast though, right? Like in the Chesapeake and whatnot?
I think the Chesapeake was still below average.
Yeah, it was
I
bad.
think the Hudson was pretty bad as well this year.
And usually where, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually we follow the Chesapeake and sometimes the Hudson. So if they're bad, we're usually bad too.
Yes. So those Young of the Year surveys. I'm not just striped bass, but red drum or other, the red drum long line surveys. When those data are updated, so the 25 data, did they all, that automatically gets updated with the FMP, or is it just that the FMP is undergoing the?
No, so we do annual FMP updates every year, and we try to put those out in August. We certainly present them to the results of those to the commission in August. And that is a comprehensive review of all of the state managed species that we have, and then all of the interjurisdictional managed species that we work on. So that'll include all of the landings data, so commercial recreational landings data, all of the data that we collect from the commercial and recreational fisheries at the fish houses or at the boat ramps, and then all of our fishery independent data too. So for red drum, we'll have the index from the gillnet survey, we'll have the index from the longline survey and the YOY survey in there. For striped bass, we'll have all of the gillnet survey and seine and trawl survey data in those as well. So it's a very comprehensive look at all of the data that we collect for these species that are informative, and we do it every year.
Yeah, and we basically need to wait for the MRIP data to be finalized. We need the trip ticket data finalized, and we need our internal dependent and independent data to be finalized. And that takes, it's all done by December, but we have to input it, get it back, quality control it a few times, and make sure that there's not any errors before the biologist then goes in and analyzes.
Also put in a plug for the License and Statistic Program Big Book. That includes all of the data that's collected from the recreational fisheries and commercial fisheries. It's broken up in a number of different ways and includes just about every species that would be landed. The License and Statistics Program kind of revamped the way that information is presented. It used to just be one big giant PDF that you had to scroll through big giant tables, and now it's all available in an online format that's a lot more user-friendly.
You can do data queries. You can look at a fishery. You can look at a species with certain years over a certain time. It's really cool, and I'd encourage you to explore it if you're curious about what landings look like over a period of time.
Get a link to that sent to us.
I'll bring it.
Okay, so
You guys should do a press release on that for the public, like, hey, because your web pages are getting much better. But that type of thing would be great. I didn't know about it. Do a press release and say, a little instruction on how to.
Yeah, so for the annual FMP update, we do a press release for those. I'm not sure we do it for the big book, but yeah.
And I actually really like that idea, Jeff, about doing a press release, like with some instructional videos on how to actually use that, because it is a huge, like we have our license and statistics section chief here, Brandy Salmon, and that's a huge change from that 300 and some page PDF document that you literally have to flip through to find what you want. It's so much nicer to be able to go to a website and have it interactive and actually select what you want to see. And you can make tables from it and download those tables. Like, it's the only thing it's not as good for is, like I said, curls. That was a big book. It'll be great for that. Like,
but yeah, what y'all were just saying about the spots, like you'd be able to filter it for like spots that were caught intercoastal waters versus in the ocean at the month time you were looking for a closure.
I don't know how in depth or how in detail it actually goes as far as like the type of water body that the spot would be demanded from. Not certain if it goes that granular.
Cool.
Yeah, so depending on whether you're talking about commercial or recreational. Commercial, there's a chance it can be broken down that way. And we're also taking feedback from the public on what data you want to see published out there too. And the big book was originally established because we're getting a lot of the same data requests over and over again from different people. And so in order to curb the amount of time that our staff worked on processing the same data request over and over again, that's why we developed the big book. So everyone could just go to that book and get the data that they needed. So now we've converted that into basically a query online that people can pull up whatever information they want to see. That is a work in progress. So it's not done by any means, because that was a lot of data. And so we're constantly tweaking it, updating it, adding more and more stuff to it. So if there is stuff that you want to see that you don't currently that's on there, let us know. And we have contact information in that link for each of the, it's structured right now like each chapter was in the paper version, but we can redo it however it's easier for people to access and use. So temporarily, it's sort of structured like that paper book, but long term, want to structure it in a way that's the best for everybody to use. So let us know. There's contact information in that website, and you can reach out to us and tell us if there's something that you see that is not there. Also, if you're talking about recreational stuff, we don't have as much of that in there because it would be repetitive with the fact that we have the Marine Recreational Information Program query tool also. So NOAA is in charge of that query tool. That's where the program that gets all of our recreational fisheries data collection. That MRIC query tool is more detailed and also complicated to use than what we have. But that is where you can get that information. If we sort of dumb down that information on ours, but if you want it broken down by water body and things like that, you would have to go to that MRIC tool. Which we have a link to that MRIC query tool in our big electronic big book link as well.
And Brandy's great at getting stuff because I'm not a computer person, but I call Brandy. I'm one of those repetitive people. She still gets it because none of the computer stuff helps at all. All right, anything else? All right, with that, we'll adjourn it. And glad to see all of you and good conversation.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
First grade yet? Kyle? Seems like it, don't it?
Thank you, Tommy.
He's doing great.
Thank you.
Build up the immune system.
Wow.